allowed to say Nazi, SS, Gestapo, or Hitler because it would offend all the decent, moderate Germans. That's how crazy it is today.
Obama and anyone previously responsible or currently protecting this agenda that has breached our national security should immediately be arrested.
The transformation of America has been in the full swing ever since 2008. Now, there's no question we got a hell of a job ahead of us. With the Muslim Brotherhood penetration in every one of our national security agencies, including all our intelligence agencies, and as been reported by some, our lead intelligence agency headed by a Muslim convert, this is not going to be an easy task.
The longer these Saudi Arabian lackeys are in power, the more Americans will be slaughtered. Stop the madness. Arm yourselves, America. Aggressively protect your First and Second Amendment rights. The globalists are bringing a war to your backyard. John Bound for Infowars.com.
Great report by John Bound. As you heard at the very end, he quoted retired Navy Admiral James Ace Lyons saying, we reportedly have someone running our intelligence community that is a converted Muslim. That would be Brennan. Now, John Brennan is somebody who has been a lawyer covering for Obama's policy of assassination and other issues. But I think it was very telling that he went to Saudi Arabia just recently. As I mentioned in the last segment, he said to them on Saudi television, imagine, have you ever heard of a CIA director going to a foreign country that is being accused of assisting a terrorist act in our country? Have you ever heard of the CIA chief going? And of course, they didn't have the CIA at the time. We had Hitler and Nazi. But what if we had the CIA during the Cold War? What if the CIA chief went to Russian television and said, don't worry, there's an investigation of you spying on us or doing something to us, but they're not going to find anything. I guarantee they're not going to find anything. This is what John Brennan did. He went to Saudi Arabia, went on live television. They translated his comments into Arabic, overdubbed it in Arabic, and he said, I think the 28 pages will be published. I support their publication. Everyone will see the evidence that the Saudi government had nothing to do with it. He's going to take care of that for them. And this is a guy, and this one of the reasons, well, besides people reporting that they have firsthand knowledge of this, look at the public acts of this man. Besides going to Saudi television this last week, this is a guy who refused to take the oath of office on the Bible. He wouldn't swear on the Bible. Now, of course, the Muslim congressman, I think it's Keith Ellison out of Michigan, if my memory serves me correctly, he would not take the oath of office on the Bible. What John Brennan did, he didn't want to pull out a Quran, so he said, I'll take it on the Constitution. But, of course, then he says, we've got to get rid of the Fourth Amendment, that Constitution that he swore the oath on. So he would not swear the oath of office on a Bible. He has gone to Mecca, to places where non-Muslims have never been allowed to go. And he also, within the intelligence community, has banned the term jihad from being used within the intelligence community. So if John Brennan is not a Muslim convert, he is definitely doing everything he can to support what they are doing. And again, Hillary Clinton, who is has gotten 20% of her campaign from the Saudis, is telling us that the only way we're going to stop these terrorist attacks is to stop them from getting the weapons they need. She says it's essential we stop terrorists from getting the tools they need to carry out the attacks. So she's using that to argue for gun control. We have to turn this around. We have to say this is not an argument. This is not a situation that's going to be solved by gun control. It's not going to be solved by background checks. The guy was investigated 3 times by the FBI. He was given statewide licenses by the state. He was hired by the largest private security firm in the world. None of these background checks, including the ones where he legally bought weapons at a store, not online, as Hillary Clinton is intimating that he did. No, he bought them at a store. He had all the background checks, and he was vetted at every level, federal, state, Homeland Security, his private employer. Nobody found anything on this guy. More background checks aren't going to do it. If we can't do background checks like that on people coming in that are here, how are we going to do background checks on the people coming across the border? How are you going to have gun control if you can't have border control? So they don't want that. As I pointed out, the people who have been responsible for over half of the deadly attacks in the past decade are second-generation people like this shooter in Orlando. Why is that? Well, think about it. What are they being taught in school? They're being taught that the U.S. is bad. They're being taught by our federally controlled schools. They're being taught that white privilege is bad, the founders are bad, the principles this country was founded upon are bad. They've got their social justice committees that they're now setting up in schools, which sound like some kind of a Marxist nightmare. But, of course, they don't want them to identify with America. They don't want them to join America. We used to talk about how America was the great melting pot. Everybody brings something into the country, and we all mix it together, and we get something that didn't exist before anywhere else, some unique blend of all these backgrounds and cultures. They don't want that. They don't want the melting pot. They want the tossed salad. They want people to remain distinct, because if they remain distinct and separate from each other in their own little enclaves, or in the case of the Muslims, in their own self-set-up and self-maintained ghettos, because they don't want to mix with the outside people. And that happens in many cases. They encourage them not to learn the language. They want us to pay for their education in a different language other than English. So they don't even want them to have a common language with us. What was the Tower of Babel about? Oh, you separate people by language, and they can't work together. They won't work together. It'll be the foundation of confusion and conflict, and that is what our government is engineering with these people who come in. That's why the second generation is worse than the first. They have no concept of the places that they came from, that even though their parents may not feel comfortable in this culture, they know that what they came from was worse than what they have here. But the kids don't know that. And the kids don't want to be identified as American because that's got too many connotations of, being connected to these white males and stuff. So let's come up with a separate identity. And that's when you get these La Raza judges that are coming against Trump. That's when you get this shooter in Orlando. Okay? These people come in like this judge, heavily pushing La Raza, push everything for the race. For people outside of the race, nothing. And he comes against Trump. It was about La Raza, just like it's about Islam for this guy. This guy mocked his classmates and celebrated at 9/11. He said, this is what America deserves. And then he shoots 50 people because the second generation hates us the most. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. I want to talk about the subtle ways that the media and the politicians control us with language. Just a subtle difference will make all the difference in the world. Before I do, we have a special on Alexa Pure water filters. All of our filters, from the largest filters down to the shower filters, are now 20% off at InfoWarsStore.com. That's the Alexa Pure filtration system that removes 99.999% of bacteria, disinfectants, volatile organic contaminants, and hormones, all the way down to the shower filter. That's for a limited time only, 20% off all the Alexa Pure water filters at InfoWarsStore.com. Now, how do they subtly do this? Well, let's take a look at the Washington Post, which has really turned into a master propaganda organization lately when it comes to Donald Trump especially. They put out this story saying the Russian government hackers have penetrated the DNC, the Democrat National Committee. They stole opposition research on Trump. Oh, see, they didn't get anything on the Democrats. It's only on Trump. See how they pivot this? It's an amazing spin they put on this thing to say, oh, this wasn't, they don't want you to think about, or maybe subtly, pushing this away from Hillary Clinton. You think that this was on a private server? Do you think that the Russian government had interest in Hillary Clinton's private server when she was Secretary of State? You think if they could hack the DNC's private server that they would have hacked her server? Of course they would have. We just reported last week, 50 times now, it's come out in a FOIA request, 50 times the Federal Reserve has been hacked into by multiple sources, okay? They're looking at their deliberations as to whether or not they're going to raise or lower interest rates. Because as the people said when the Federal Reserve was being created, Senator Lindbergh said, you're giving people the power to manipulate markets, to make them rise, to make them fall, to know the timing of those rises and falls in the marketplace. You're giving them incredible power and wealth to do that. And, of course, people can now hack. If you got the right tools, you can now hack into the private discussions of the Federal Reserve and get that information. Or you can get all of the federal government's data on all of its employees. That's been done, too. So why wouldn't we think that they would get Hillary Clinton's private email server? The Washington Post spins it and says, oh, it's about Donald Trump. They're getting opposition research on Donald Trump. You think they can't get that elsewhere? You think the Democrats know something about Donald Trump that the Russians don't know? Come on. It's they're just trying to push you away from that. Here's another example of subtle deceit, and that's the new gun control group that David Petraeus is putting out there. They call it the Veterans Coalition for Common Sense, and they're going to be coming after the guns of veterans. And David Petraeus says this. He says, we need to do more to prevent gun tragedies. As service members, each of us swore an oath to protect our Constitution and the homeland. Now we're asking leaders to do more to protect our rights and save lives. Yes, please protect our rights and take away our guns. Please honor your oath to the Constitution and destroy it. We got Paul Ryan saying a Muslim ban is not in our country's interest, coming out and attacking Donald Trump. He's never attacked Obama like this, but he attacks Donald Trump, and he misstates it. He says, I do not think a Muslim ban is in our country's interest. Paul Ryan, that is a lie. Donald Trump has never called for a Muslim ban. The Hill actually got it right. They were actually honest about this. They say Trump doubled down on his plan to temporarily ban nearly all Muslims. Okay, it's a temporary ban, not to ban everybody forever. That's the way they're spinning this, okay? That's another subtle thing. But then sometimes they're not so subtle. This new article from Kit Daniels, Rolling Stone demands a repeal of the Second Amendment. This is a constitutional lawyer, so-called constitutional lawyer, says the Second Amendment is a threat to liberty. Sometimes we just have to acknowledge the founders and the Constitution are wrong, said David Cohen in the Rolling Stones magazine. This is one of those times. We need to say it loud and clear. The Second Amendment must be repealed. No, get rid of Rolling Stones magazine. It's a piece of trash. So is David Petraeus. Join us tonight, 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight.